Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Mindset Check today. I have a special guest, Sid Muldrow, sorry. And Sid is somebody you have to meet. I mean, if you go online even and check her out online, you just the immediate feeling I got was, man, this lady has confidence. This lady has beauty outside and within her. She is filled with life. You have such this nice energy about you. And I was thinking, I was like,
You.
how do I even know? How did we meet? And I don't know if you remember. Do you remember how we know each
I
other?
I don't I don't
Okay.
remember. I don't know if it was like a real estate event or maybe
Uh-huh.
another realtor that you were working with maybe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
that part's a
remember.
little hazy,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Sid is a phenomenal professional first and foremost, but she is a great human being. I was kind of researching you. You were in Florida for a while, really crushed it out there, succeeded on all many levels. I saw that you're actually fluent in Chinese. Crazy.
I am.
That's awesome. So we'll go into a couple stories there, but yeah, I just loved how when I met you in person, which was like a few weeks ago, you were pretty much what I felt when I saw your social media stuff, and I think you're pretty transparent, and you just got great energy. So thank you for being on
Yeah.
the show. That was a long introduction,
Oh
but
no, no, not at all. I try my best to be genuine and authentic, and I think that's really important. Kind of goes along the lines of our topic today. It's like,
yes.
that's what makes me happy. And, there's something about people who are genuine and authentic.
Hmm.
And I think you can feel it, It's almost,
Yes.
it's hard to explain. It's like when people are not themselves, you can tell,
Yeah.
and it's like you can't put your finger on it, but you just know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's kind of this, I don't know if it's primitive or not, but this kind of reflex as a human being, another human seeing somebody not be themselves. It's almost like you are almost hesitant to trust because you're like, well, if you're not, honest with yourself, how can you be honest with me?
Correct. I,
Right.
I agree with you 100%. I think, if you can't be yourself, how do you expect others to believe in you and trust you and yeah, just believing you as a person? I think that's
Sure.
a really hard task to do.
Well, I want to go into this because I love. First of all, I think you definitely come across as a very confident individual, which I want to talk about. Um,
I always wasn't that confident, trust me.
well, we'll dive into that. I want to know. I want to kind of dissect that. And number two, our topic, our title for today is finding happiness from within, the truth about being happy. And I found this very intriguing because you actually mentioned this in a podcast that you were on before, which I'm happy to say that I'm piggybacking off of that because I loved your answer, and I feel like all the stuff I was researching and then kind of some of the questions you sent back were all on a very professional level, and I was like, how can I get Sid to talk about like something that can really penetrate the professional level, and just kind of be like, I mean, we're all individual people at the core, right? So what can she say to help other people, whether they're a realtor or not, or whether they're in the real estate industry or not, or from a kid to an older elderly person listening. Happiness is something I think that we can all struggle with because it's almost like we have a coming back to the happiness that maybe we were born with. I believe we were born with, but somewhere along the line, like either society or parents or what have
We
you,
lost
we
it.
lost it. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. No, I,
Talk,
I,
talk to
I
me about that if you can.
so I think a lot has to do with, as much as, we love social media and the purpose of it and how it helps with business and individuals and
Hmm.
created a bunch of jobs. At the same time, I think comparison,
Sure.
the level of comparison grew to a point it's almost like subconsciously, like you don't even know why you're not happy
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
you're like subconsciously comparing yourself to these people
Sure.
on social media or in some other way. It doesn't have to be through social media or what you see, especially in my profession, a lot of
Right.
social media, but you're
Oh
comparing yourself
gosh,
to these
yes.
people who probably rehearse something a million times, and what you see was the end result, and you're like, wow, this person is so perfect.
Sure.
And now you're like, you're talking down to yourself because
Mhm.
of something that you saw online.
Mhm.
I don't know how old you are, but I grew up in an age where the internet wasn't that big of a thing yet.
Sure.
There
Yep.
wasn't smartphones
Yep.
and social media. You
Well,
have, if you want to hang out with a friend, you actually had to call them and show up.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 39. I feel like we're I'm in a generation where we we experienced life before all this, and now
Yes,
we're
yes.
experiencing life after it like totally changed our world. And it's very interesting because you're right. Like if you had a friend, you wanted to connect with them, like you'd have to go through some more effort to get a hold of them or to communicate with
Right.
somebody. So there's definitely some pros and cons, right? I think there's the beauty is the flip side of the ugly, right? And it's like the ugly
Exactly.
side of social media is there, but so is like there's a lot of beauty in it, right? Like I feel I have access to some people and some knowledge that if social media and video and what have you was not around, like I wouldn't be I wouldn't be able to really internalize and kind of embody certain ideas and beliefs that I wouldn't have been exposed to, right? Like people you follow, people you podcasts
Hmm.
you listen to. Like, imagine if all that was gone. Like, the only thing that you could do is like maybe pick up a book at the library, hope that you run into somebody that can help influence you to create a better life.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons, but I think, I would say it's pretty even. I would say 50-50 the pros and cons, because
Sure.
I think, and I don't know, because I'm, again, like you say, we're more exposed to it because of the World Wide Web or
Right.
social media, that we're seeing a lot more depression
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
therapy websites, and just taking the stigma off of therapy. I go
Sure.
to therapy. I love it. I think
Uh
it's
huh.
great to have someone to talk to,
That's beautiful.
and not it's not always going to be your best friend. It's someone
Sure.
that actually went to school to learn about these reasons of why you feel a certain way when you feel a
Sure.
certain way.
Yeah.
um it's like almost like like a business coach. I look at therapy as a business coach, like, hey,
Sure.
I'm having these issues. Is this someone to like talk to that kind of gives you another outlook on life and how you're approaching it?
You're awesome. I mean, the fact that you're able to talk about it and be honest and just be like, "Hey, I go to therapy," I think is amazing. I think we're again in a generation that, like, we have now some tools to heal. Like if I think about my parents and my parents' parents, my grandparents, obviously, we're probably like the first generation that is like, okay, let me heal. Like, let me heal some wounds. Let me heal some trauma. Let me heal whatever. Um, because our parents didn't have that type of resource like we do now. So I think we're in a unique position as we enter this phase. At least for me, at this phase of my life, as an adult is different, right? You're having choices. Like I can take the steps to get therapy, or I won't, and nobody's going to push me either way. And so I think it's awesome
Right.
that you're doing it, and I applaud you for that, and thank you for sharing that.
Oh, of course. I'm a big proponent of it. I think it's eye awakening. I feel like it opens up your mind, because these people that you're talking to, they go to school and study this,
Uh
and
huh.
sometimes we don't know all the answers, and then not that they have all the answers, but it's just someone to talk it out with.
Mm-hmm.
because there's no personal interest there, right? They're
Sure.
just there to kind of help you go through whatever you're going through, rather work or personal, whatever it could be. And one of my favorite quotes, in talking about comparison, is Theodore Roosevelt that says,
Mm-hmm.
comparison is the thief of joy. I think a lot of people go through, that stint in their lives. I've
Sure.
been there before where
Sure.
I was comparing myself. Oh man, I'm not doing as well. I'm not as pretty or whatever
Mm-hmm.
this might be, and that really sends you down the opposite path of happiness.
Agreed. And so we're, you're talking about what prevents you from being happy, which is that comparison game. And I couldn't agree with you more. What is the path to happiness? Like, and obviously you talked about it coming from within. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think, going back to what we were speaking about before, is like being genuine,
Mm-hmm.
being yourself. You don't have to like the same things that everyone else like, because that's not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
You're pretending to be someone else, and that really shows. And therefore,
Mm.
you're not happy because that's not something that you're actually interested in. That's not
Sure.
something that you actually like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, being genuine, being true to yourself, being authentic. I know prior to the pandemic, I try to appease everyone,
Mm.
or I try my best to make it to every social occasion, or,
Mm-hmm.
I had FOMO, didn't want to miss out on anything for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, it was like, I think there's a technical term for this, but it was like surface happiness,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
you weren't really doing it for yourself. You were doing it
Sure.
to make other people happy, because the expectation, but you weren't doing it authentically, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So I think being genuine, authentic, being true to yourself, doing what makes you happy, even though it
Mm-hmm.
might not be something that all your friends will like.
Mm-hmm.
I like hiking. Not all my friends like hiking. I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay with going by myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to do things that is against, the greater, crowd or likeness of everything.
And you talked about, being in a place where you're more comparing yourself to other people, maybe not so happy, maybe even not so authentic, right? Because I think, I mean, if you think of high school and in that phase, like
Oh
most
my
people are
gosh, I
trying to
was bullied in high school.
wow, no
Believe it or
way.
not, because I didn't fit in.
Uh-huh.
I was,
You definitely
I
don't look like somebody who would be
yeah, I
bullied.
wasn't black, I wasn't Chinese,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't white. I was
Uh-huh.
very different. In high school, high school. Oh my gosh, high school is not easy by any
Brutal.
means. It's brutal,
Yeah.
and I couldn't imagine going to high school now with social media and everything.
Oh
But
my gosh, no way.
so I didn't fit in that way. But I took all the smart classes, like the AP
Hmm.
classes. So like people will make fun of you because, oh, you're hanging out with the smart kids. And I was
Sure.
in the chess club, I was in the drama club. It's like doing things that you like, and you're always going to be judged for certain things.
Yep.
But it's just having the strength to not let that bother you
Mm.
and move past it. Yeah.
Totally, totally. And do you have any big milestones that you can remember, can recall, where you were moving from a place of maybe unhappiness to a place of happiness because you were starting to, exist from an authentic place?
I want to say from high school to college, it was a
Mm-hmm.
very good milestone, because at the end of the day, life's bigger than high school. Once you get comfortable with your skin, and college is a little bit more diverse in the
Mm-hmm.
sense, like, you have people coming from all over the world.
Right.
Um, yeah, you have all these topics that are really like burning in you. Like, oh my God, I get to study this
Mm-hmm.
topic. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
great. I think that's kind of where I started, to blossom, like getting
Yep.
comfortable in my own skin, because there's such a bigger world out there. A
Yes.
lot of people get stuck, like, like that hometown, feeling of being stuck.
Sure.
Like there's so much more out there.
And you talked about confidence too, right? So you said, "Oh, I wasn't always as confident," you know, and confidence is kind of it's a tricky thing in the sense of like I feel like you come across very confident, but even you might be like, well, I don't think I'm as confident as you think, and then some people are like, they seem less confident than they are, and then they are super confident. right? So it's like almost very it's almost hard to grasp, but
Hmm.
talk to me about how confidence has played a role, and how would you say you gained confidence, or how do you gain more confidence? Because I think we're always gaining a little bit more confidence, hopefully.
I think, I always tell people, like, there's certain things I did in my life that I look back, I'm like, I'm so glad I did that,
Mm-hmm.
because it made me feel more confident. For example, like going to the movies by yourself.
Mm.
Like there's probably a handful of people, more than a handful of people that never even done that. But
Uh-huh.
it's like little things like that to build your confidence, because then you realize, what was I so afraid of?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? So it's just like little things like that, or going out to eat by yourself. Like, it's not so much work related, but it's just getting yourself out of that fear of why you were scared of it to begin with. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that slowly builds a confidence, because then you realize you don't really need an audience all the
Mm-hmm.
time. The
Mm.
audience is like a compliment. You got to
Yes.
treat it as that. And then I think that slowly builds your confidence. And having a mentor helped build confidence,
Mm-hmm.
because that mentor might have more experience in my
Mm-hmm.
profession, than I had at the time. So it's doing things with your mentor that's like, oh, you know I feel confident on doing this on my own in the future, because I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what I was afraid of. I was afraid of being asked a question I didn't know the answer to and didn't know how
Mm-hmm.
to answer it. So it's kind
Yeah.
of just doing little things to help build your confidence. Every little step helps. You don't have to take a giant leap every time,
Mm-hmm.
but just doing little things that will build your confidence in the future.
Now, what's interesting, you mentioned two things, either going to the movies by yourself or eating out by yourself. I wonder if the element of being by yourself forces you to, be with yourself, which is, I think, for so many of us, it's hard, and we have so many distractions that there's a good chance you're really never with yourself alone, right? You're either, even your thoughts, if they're going, your brain's going full speed. Even if you're like walking by yourself, you're not really present with yourself. Does that make sense? Like, unless you take the time to actively go somewhere and be like, okay, especially somebody like me, I love being around people, I love people, but then I realized as I got older, I'm like, you're just kind of probably avoiding, spending time with yourself, because you're
Right.
scared of yourself, and then you're scared of being more of yourself,
Yeah,
right?
and no, and I completely agree, because, you know, I I read somewhere, I wish I can quote it, but I read somewhere in the pandemic, a lot of people became depressed, because they're so used to being around other people, that when
Uh-huh.
you had to hunker down for, I forgot how long we had to stay isolated for, like
Sure.
2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people had, like you said, they had to be by themselves. I mean, granted, you have TV, social media, whatever it might have you. There
Sure.
was all kinds of apps at that point where you can connect to people, virtually. But
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't enough for some people. They
Right.
needed that outside connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, either they're not happy,
Mm-hmm.
um, with themselves. Not
Yes.
saying that's always the case, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, the whole extrovert to energized type person. I think
Sure.
it's definitely a personality type, because I'm truly an introvert, which
Uh-huh.
is
Oh,
weird, because when
wow.
people meet me, they're
Yeah.
like, "How are you an introvert?"
Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
you don't seem like it, but I think it's a skill. I think socializing is a skill, and so just because you're great at socializing doesn't mean you're necessarily you prefer to be extroverted. It's just a
Correct.
skill,
Yeah.
and
And
I
and
think.
I energize myself by being
Mm,
alone. Like, I can have a very extroverted, exciting, around, a lot of people weekends, and
uh-huh.
then I become like a hermit crab for like 2 weeks
Yeah,
afterwards,
you need to
because I
refuel.
need to, yeah, I need to regress. I need
Yes.
to pull back,
Uh-huh.
a little bit just to kind of like focus on myself and doing the things that I like, because sometimes social events put you in situations where, I like, here's the thing I do. I don't drink during the week.
Mm,
Like a lot of
mhm,
people like, you don't
mhm.
even have a glass of wine. Like, no, not really. Nothing.
Uh-huh.
Because I like to be super focused. I work out every day. I do a walking meditation with my dog for 2 miles. When I
That's
say
awesome.
meditation, I mean, no, I don't even listen to music. I don't listen to Audible book.
Wow.
I try not to get on my phone for at least 30 minutes,
Mhm.
and it's just like walking
Wow.
in nature and listening to, what's going on around you.
And where did you
Uh,
learn about that concept?
I learned walking meditation from my therapist,
Okay.
because I like,
Nice.
it's really hard for me to sit in bed or sit on my
Uh-huh.
yoga mat and meditate for like, for 5 minutes. Or I used to do yoga and then I would meditate in yoga, when I finished my practice.
Right.
But then I was like, oh, now I have a dog. Like, what can
Sure.
I do? And they're like, oh, there's walking meditation.
Nice.
It's like you're
Yes.
just walking, taking everything in, and you're
Mhm.
not being distracted by all the nuances of like gadgets.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that's I'm similar to you in that aspect. One thing that's super helpful for me is breathing meditation. Like just
Okay.
breath work has opened door like just like into just understanding kind of emotions or how I'm feeling, like, and also just calming nerves, calming anxiety, what have you. Like breathing, you realize when you actually focus on your breathing, I mean, at least for me, I realized how bad I was at breathing. Like,
Oh, I'm trust me, I'm the same way. I like I read somewhere is oh god, there's a book in this
mhm,
space. I think in the book it says breathing through your mouth is bad.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah, it's like breathing through your nose is better, because in your mouth you're taking in all the pollutants and
mhm,
you're not breathing correctly. It's
right.
it's like a way of slowing yourself down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
had I had I had tongue tie. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is.
oh yeah, I haven't heard that term in a long time.
Yeah, so tongue tie, and then my daughters were born with tongue tie. My
Yeah,
wife
it's
has,
hereditary, right?
yeah, my wife has tongue tie, so of course my daughters both have tongue tie, and so there's this whole, like, if you're a mouth breather, there's a chance that you could have tongue tie because even if you're older, like you've gotten into the habit of just breathing out of your mouth,
Hmm.
and then it's amazing how that impacts everything from your teeth to your gut health to like everything.
Yes, gut health. Yeah, yeah. I think the book is called Breath. I could be wrong.
Well, that would be
But
appropriate.
yeah.
So,
um, but yeah, it's very interesting how something that we do every day could, in not realizing that we've been doing it wrong.
and well, what I've done is, like, if I'm feeling anxious or if I'm feeling stressed, like I tune in and I'm like, well, how's my breathing? And then I'm like, oh, I'm not either breathing,
Hmm.
or I'm breathing very, very short, very, not deep, right? So it's
Yeah,
got to be deep breaths, and then
yeah.
just again, like you said, breathing out of your nose. What is something that you're currently utilizing to overcome a challenge, overcome anything that's helping you grow, right? So, like we talked about breath work, we talked about a meditation, we talked about books and whatnot. Like, is there anything that right now that's on your radar that's kind of like, hey, this is something that I'm going to hold on to this week because it's helping me kind of push along?
I'm always trying to improve the art of listening.
Mm,
Yeah,
hmm.
I feel like even though I'm getting better with it, I
Hmm.
think sometimes we listen to respond versus just listening.
Hmm.
I'm trying to work on that every day. And
Hmm.
it's not something I'm actually that bad at,
Hmm.
but I feel like I could be better. So I'm working on that. I feel like that's something that's very important,
Hmm.
personally, professionally. I'm not a bad listener, but I feel like I
Sure.
could be better. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think you can always improve on pretty much any aspect of your life. It's cool that you chose listening. Is there anything that you're actively doing like in conversation? Are you like, oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
you know
like
what? Let me.
yeah, no, absolutely. When I'm in conversation with someone, I try to let them finish their thought before I jump in.
Hmm.
So like I've been, but you're like
So hard if it's a good
it's so
conversation, right?
hard,
Yeah.
but you're actively doing it. You're
Yeah,
actively
yeah,
doing it, and that I
sure.
think that's um, pretty cool. Like I feel like I'm actively trying to do it. You know,
Hmm.
like today I'm gonna let this person finish their thought, and it's
Yeah,
almost like and everyone's the same. Like no one's perfect by any means, or it's not saying that if you interrupt someone that you're not
right,
listening, but it's
right.
just kind of like letting that person finish their thought and then
Hmm.
chime in versus actively having a conversation within their conversation
Yeah.
or yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I'm gonna try to get one more out of you if I can. So if you can answer like what is the best piece of advice? And now this is obviously very loaded question. You probably have several, but
Oh, I
what's the best
know.
piece of advice you've ever gotten? And it doesn't have to be the best. Just what's the first thing that came to mind when I asked you for the best piece of advice?
Honestly, the first thing that came to mind is doing something different from your profession to get you motivated for the day.
Hmm.
And the first thing that popped into my head was the fact that I love working out. Like, I love taking care of my body
Uh-huh.
physically. Like, I love, like, that's the first thing I do in the morning. It's other than the 2 mile walking meditation, like, my
Yes.
next thing is I work out,
Hmm.
and I think that's so healthy to kind of release those endorphins, release the negative energy. It's a
Yes.
healthy way for a release, like, to me,
It's therapy too, Sid.
it's therapeutic, 100%,
Yep.
because I
Yep.
don't, you can't rely on, binge eating or drinking and,
Right.
alcohol. Like, that's not healthy in the long run, right?
Sure.
So you have to have a healthy release. And I
Yes.
think my healthy release is, obviously I have a routine, but it's like working out, like having a good hobby. And if you're not into working out, go for a long walk. Go for
Hmm.
a 5 mile, 4 mile, 2 mile walk, something. And if you have a dog, that gives you a better reason to go out for a
Right.
walk. So it's like just having healthy releases, I
Hmm.
think is great. I have a lot of friends that surf. I personally don't surf, but
Hmm.
for them, being out on that water, regardless if there's waves or not, it's like their meditation.
Hmm.
So just having some type of healthy release that's not related to your job
Uh-huh.
or something that could be very stress driven. Like,
Uh-huh.
a job is stressful. Like, I'm in a very stressful, industry. So
Yes.
for me, it's like working out with people, and half the times they don't even know what I do outside of the workout. They just know that I come every day,
Yep.
and it's like we're all struggling to get through this workout together,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
worrying about, what do you do,
Sure.
what are you doing here, so I
I think
think
it
having a helpful release is the key to a good and healthy life.
it makes so much sense. I mean, having a healthy release, and then what's great you just mentioned, which I thought of, and I was like, oh, that's kind of how I feel as well, which is if you're interacting with others, especially if it's outside of your industry, outside of your profession, it's almost like a reminder, like you're humanizing yourself in that moment. Like, look, I am not just a realtor or whatever, right? I'm not just a teacher, I'm not just a firefighter, what have you. I'm also human, and I'm also connected to other humans. I'm a part of human race, and so there's just this connectivity of like, oh, after we get rid of all of our labels, we all have the same label, which is human. So I think there's a cool humanizing aspect to working out with other people, right? Because they don't know you, they don't know, well, they might know you, but they don't really care what you do, right? In a sense of like they're not gonna measure whether you're worth speaking to or working out with based on what you do.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I completely agree, and it's just like, even if it's just joining like a art club or
Mm-hmm.
a walking club, a run club,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know, just doing something. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't cost any money,
Sure.
to do, and it just gives you like a chance to, you know, get outside of your bubble.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Agreed.
yeah,
Agreed.
yeah,
And this is honestly that's exactly why we started, this podcast. It was just like I felt like I needed to connect with people and to connect with people that I was genuinely interested in talking with and just being like, hey, let's talk about deeper stuff because I felt like, when I first started the podcast, it was very professional, like, oh, what do you do, like how talking all that, and I felt like that was great, but it was more impactful for a wider audience and even for my guests if we talked about real stuff like we're talking about now. Like
hmm
this is helping me. I believe it's helping you. It's helping whoever's listening. Like, oh, like humanizing and taking away the whole perfection that often comes, like you said, with social media, and just being like, look, we all struggle, we all have challenges, and like these are some ways that I overcome my challenges, and give it a shot. If it works for you, great. If not, like keep searching for
yeah.
ways to that work for you, that resonate with you. So, Sid, thank you so much.
Of course. And I want to say one thing.
Yes.
You asked me some great questions that I never get asked.
Wow.
And I think that's a great thing, like it's challenging. It's making you think like, wow, no one ever asked me this. How do I
Mm.
feel about this? And I didn't really have that much time
Uh-huh.
to prepare, which is
Yes.
great because these are honest answers, right? These
Sure.
are these are exactly how I feel at that moment when you ask me that
Uh-huh.
question. So
Yep.
I want to thank you for
Oh.
asking, getting like real, the
Yes.
real podcast, like
Yes.
asking the good stuff.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes we get sidetracked, or if we were talking about my industry,
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, oh, inflation, this, that, whatever, how's it affecting,
Yes.
the San Diego housing market, all this stuff. I feel like it's kind of like superficial because
Yes.
that's work.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not real, it's happening, but it's like
Yes.
this is like the real stuff that I think about, and it's because I'm more than just a realtor, like you said.
Yes.
There's more to me than what you see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I appreciate these, great questions.
Oh, that's one of the sweetest things anyone has ever said to me on the podcast.
I wanted to make sure you knew that
Oh,
before we got off this podcast or call, but yeah, I really appreciate that.
well, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back on in the future,
Of
and
course.
thanks again, and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.